Shalom, family, and welcome back to the Semitic Jew channel, where I examine scripture in its proper context using things like logic and discernment. In this New Testament series, I've been analyzing every book of the New Testament bit by bit in summary format. So today I'm arriving at the book of First John. First John focuses heavily on things like discernment, our obedience to God's commandments, and even our identity living among the heathen. So John is writing to Israelites in the covenant community who are facing false teachers and confusion about things like truth, sin, and righteousness. So this letter works almost like a spiritual diagnostic test, if you will, where John explains how believers can recognize true faith versus deception. So let's break it down. First of all, the opening is very key. The eyewitness testimony of John, meaning that John saw Jesus in the flesh. So John knows exactly what Christ looks like. He would be very confused about why people are painting him as a white man today, because Jesus was not white. Jesus was black. So John begins the letter by emphasizing something very important. He reminds the reader that the message they received about Christ was not speculation. It was based on direct eyewitness testimony. So John writes, he says this, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, and our hands have held, of the word of life. He's talking about Christ. So he's telling you, look, we are credible. We talked, ate, handled this man, saw this man. That's First John chapter 1, verse 1. So to put it in a different way, the apostles were not spreading human philosophy or coming up with a new religion or taking Christ and applying him to Zeus or to Ra or any of that bogus mythology that people are talking about. Christ was an actual man. So John is testifying to something that they personally seen and experienced. This establishes the foundation for the rest of the letter, because truth in our community must come from authentic testimony, not innovation, not smoke and mirrors, not European hermeneutics, not some new teaching, none of that. We don't need any of that. We only need the scriptures. So walking in light is another one of those key themes here. Is he establishes the credibility from the jump by saying, look, we talk to this man so you can trust me. So in First John, the contrast about that is between light and darkness, not white and black, because that came in with European hermeneutics, that black skin was darkness and so-called pale skin is righteousness. That is demonic, and that is of a doctrine of demons. So these Europeans, of course, they don't know the scriptures, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but John is not pulling from their theology, because John writes, he says, God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. That's First John 1:5. So if someone claims to know God, but continues living in darkness, meaning continuing not to keep God's commandments or reducing God's commandments to things like, oh, we just have to keep the 10 commandments, we can eat pork, or there's no way you're keeping 613, not knowing that there is no such thing as 613 different laws. So the people who are living in darkness are the ones who are not keeping God's commandments and are keeping things like Easter, Halloween, Christmas, and all of those pagan traditions. Those people are living in darkness. So their claim does not match their conduct. John is reinforcing a principle that's seen throughout all scripture. Faith must be aligned with our behavior. Obedience is the evidence of genuine belief. Obedience is the evidence of genuine belief. And that brings me to the next theme, because his letter is all about a covenant of love, not that emasculated, soft, pudgy stuff, because that's sentimentality. In this book, love is expressed in the covenant community, and John reminds his readers that love is not a new commandment. It's not new. They brought in that effeminate, Christ, where Christ is holding the lamb and is looking all soft. That's not biblical. What is he talking about? He's talking about the commandments being continually practiced. So he writes, he says this, he that loveth his brother abideth in the law, or abideth in the light. Okay. He actually says light, but another word for light is the law. So loving your brother is abiding in the law. That's First John 2:10, and also abiding in the light as well. So things like hatred, jealousy, division are signs that something has gone wrong spiritually in you or in your environment. And most likely it could manifest in marriages, it can manifest in business relationships. There's something wrong in that relationship. So John emphasized that the covenant community must be marked by love. How do you love? You love as Christ loved the church. You love by keeping God's commandments. Unity and accountability. People have to be accountable. Now, with all of those things in mind, there are warnings about deception as well, because John also warns his audience that deception is going to come. You have false teachers that are growing and that are spreading problems and falsehoods in many communities. So I'll put it a different way, because he elaborates on that in 1 John 2:18. He says, even now are there many antichrists. What are antichrists? Anti means not or against. Christ is obviously referring to one person. That means the Messiah, who was a Jew, who was black. All right. So anyone who is against that has the spirit of the Antichrist. Now, people will say, that's not the spirit of the Antichrist. They don't know what the spirit of the Antichrist is, because they assume that Eurocentrism was the foundation of Scripture, but it never was. The word Antichrist does not only refer to a person, or can refer to a person. A person can be an antichrist, but John is describing the teachings that oppose or distort the truth about Christ, meaning that Jesus was white, that you only have to have faith, you don't have to do anything. Those are antichrist teachings. And so another way to think about it is this: is they're taking their teachings and they're replacing the truth of Scripture with something false. That's antichrist. That's antithetical to the Scriptures. And so history shows many examples of this. Over time, some of those traditions even reshape the message of the Bible through cultural lens. European centricism. They're Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, the Philistines. They're everybody, and they're no one either. So this type of teaching is satanic. And so they promoted other philosophies, things like faith without obedience. You hear that all the time. You just have to have faith, brother. That's not in the Scriptures. Even the demons believe. The idea that an entire race of people are cursed by God, meaning like if you had black skin, then you were cursed by God. That's absolutely ridiculous. Or doctrines that separate the covenant from the ethnic Israelites who are scattered into all nations. They want to import it on the people who look like them, the people who appear European, the people who are in modern Palestine today. So these distortions are exactly the type of error that John warns us about. When Scripture is removed from its historical and covenant context, it is easily reshaped by cultural traditions rather than the truth, which is why John immediately gives an important instruction. He says you need to test the spirits. So he says, beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are of God. That's 1 John 4:1. So in other words, we should not accept every religious claim at face value. You have people posting images of Christ and it's a white guy and they're like, oh yeah. And they never correct it. And so we're fighting against that type of falsehood. Their teachings must be tested with the Scriptures, and they never line up with the Scriptures. Ideas must be measured against the actual text of Scripture, not tradition or popularity. So discernment protects the community, our community, from their deception, because things like Halloween, Christmas, those things will seep in, and you'll think, oh, the kids, man, just let them do it. Just let them have fun. They're just having fun. There's other ways to have fun other than give them paganism. Because if false ideas are never examined, they eventually become accepted as truths, which is why we are here today. So we need to overcome the world, is what John is saying. And so he reminds us of the pressures that are going to surround us in this life. But he encourages us with a very powerful statement. He says, "Whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world." So if you're born of God, you will overcome the world. You will overcome white Jesus. You'll overcome this idea that you need to have faith only. You'll overcome this idea of racism, where you have a problem with black Jesus, or you have a problem with the fact that the Israelites are black. Whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world. That's 1 John 5:4. So victory is not defined by power or influence in our influence, because many victories have come by power and by influence. I mean, you look at social media, the vast majority of our videos don't get enough traction, but the opposition does, and they're giving you trash. What is victory defined as? It's defined as faithfulness and keeping God's commandments through endurance. So the book of First John teaches that believers must walk in the light rather than darkness. That means keeping God's commandments rather than not, and practicing genuine love within the covenant community. That means loving your brothers and not hating them. We got to stop the violence. We got to stop killing each other over petty stuff. And we got to take care of our families. That's what genuine love is. We have to return back to our covenant with the Most High God. We have to get out of their systems. Their systems are not meant for us. Moreover, we need to remain obedient while enduring hardship. And you have to test these teachings that we're hearing online. You have to, every time you see a white Jesus, get that out of your house. Get that out of your, don't let your children be absorbed by that garbage. So you have to guard them and yourselves against deception. And yes, it's a lot of work. But again, if you are born of God, you will overcome the world. So John's message is very simple and powerful. Truth and love must exist together, because without truth, love really becomes sentimentality. Without truth, love becomes sentimentality. And without love, truth becomes harsh, because you have to have both. You have to have both present in our community in order for our communities to remain strong, truth and love. So if this summary helped clarify the book of First John, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And please do not miss the next breakdown on the New Testament series. In the next episode, I want to examine the book of Second John, a short but powerful letter that continues John's warning about false teachers entering our communities, and explains why we must be careful who we support and who we endorse as teachers. And if you want deeper conversations about scripture, history, and biblical reasoning, please check out the Semitic Jew podcast, where we examine many of these topics in longer discussions. Shalom, and I'll see you in the next one.